He kissed her right there, in front of our kids. And I recorded it. I can still hear the sound of the bus brakes squealing, the laughter of the kids running toward home, and that 1 second, that single second, when my husband forgot I existed. If you're hearing this, I want you to know. I never thought I'd become that woman. The one who checks her husband's phone, who zooms in on blurry screenshots, who shakes when she hits record. But sometimes, life pushes you so far into disbelief that you have to collect proof, not for others, but for your own sanity. I'm glad you're here. Because I need to tell you what it feels like when the life you built turns out to be a lie. Not in private, not behind closed doors, but out there, in public, where your children can see it crumble. Let me start from the beginning. Back when I thought my marriage was the safest place in the world, we lived in a quiet cul-de-sac in Ohio. The kind of place where the biggest gossip was, whose grass got too tall before Sunday service. I was the mom who packed lunches with handwritten notes. My husband, Michael, was the guy who helped neighbors fix their lawnmowers. People called us that perfect couple. Every Friday, we had pizza and movie night. We'd spread a blanket on the living room floor. The kids would pick the movie, and Michael would make his corny dad jokes that made us all groan. That was our life. Simple, predictable, safe. I think back now and wonder when it started. That tiny, invisible shift in the air. Maybe it was when he started showering the moment he got home from work, saying, "I smell like the office." Or maybe when he began working late nights that turned into really late nights. At first, I didn't think much of it. We were married 12 years. Routines change. People get tired. But then the silence between us began to feel heavy. The kind of silence that fills a room even when two people are sitting side by side. I'd catch myself watching him scroll through his phone, the glow lighting up his face while he smiled, not the tired kind of smile he used to give me at bedtime, but something lighter, younger. The night that broke everything, I wasn't looking for trouble. It was a Wednesday. The kids were asleep, and I was folding laundry on the couch. His phone buzzed beside me. Normally, I never touched it, but the name that flashed across the screen wasn't one I recognized. "See you tonight, my love." My heart stopped. It wasn't hun, it wasn't babe, it was my love. Words I hadn't heard in months. I stared at that screen until it went black. My hands started to shake, but my mind went quiet. It's strange. When betrayal hits you, you expect screaming or tears. But what I felt was clarity. A kind of calm that comes right before a storm. I didn't confront him that night. I just waited. The next morning, I packed the kids' lunches, kissed their foreheads, and watched him get ready for work. He hummed while buttoning his shirt, that same old tune he used to sing when we first dated. I remember thinking, he looks so happy. And that made me realize, whatever he was doing, it wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. That was the day I decided to stop crying and start watching. The universe has a strange way of giving you signs when you ask for truth. That Friday, I offered to take the kids to the bus stop myself. Usually that was his job. A little morning ritual he said made his day better. He hesitated when I told him, "You sure? I can do it." But I smiled. "No, you deserve a break." I knew something would happen. I could feel it in my bones. So I parked a little ways down the street, where the hedges could hide me but still give me a clear view. My phone camera was ready. The morning light was soft, the air cool. Kids laughed, dogs barked, a normal morning in our quiet street. And then, she appeared. A woman I'd never seen before, maybe late 20s, holding a coffee cup, walking straight toward him. He smiled. The kind of smile he hadn't given me in years. And before I could even breathe, he leaned down and kissed her, right there. Right in front of our kids. Our little boy tugged at his backpack, looking up at them, confused. I hit record. My hands were shaking so hard the video came out a little blurry, but I didn't care. It was enough. Proof. The bus arrived, the kids climbed on, and he watched them go, still talking to her, like nothing was wrong. The world hadn't just collapsed. You know that feeling when your heart cracks open, but you can't scream because you're afraid the neighbors might hear? That was me, sitting in my car, gripping the steering wheel, replaying the video over and over. Every time I watched it, a part of me died. The part that still hoped there was an explanation. There wasn't. There never is. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I whispered, "You wanted proof? You got it." And I drove home. That's where my story really begins. Not with heartbreak, but with evidence. Because once you hold the truth in your hands, the question isn't what happened. It's what are you going to do about it? And I knew exactly what I was going to do. Before all of this, before cameras and evidence and tears, I refused to cry. There was just us, Michael and me. We met in the least romantic place possible, a DMV line. He joked that I looked too kind to survive government paperwork, and I laughed because it was true. He was charming, funny, the kind of man who made you feel safe just by being near him. We dated for a year, got married in a small church, and built a life that looked, from the outside, picture perfect. We had 2 kids, a mortgage we could barely afford, and matching lawn chairs for the 4th of July fireworks. We weren't rich, but we were content. And I used to think contentment was the same thing as happiness. Michael worked in IT for a logistics company downtown. He'd leave early, coffee in one hand, tie slightly crooked, and always kiss my forehead before walking out the door. He'd say, "Don't wait up, babe," when projects ran late, and I never questioned it. That's what trust looked like to me. Not asking questions. My days were filled with routine, school drop-offs, grocery runs, after-school snacks, homework battles, and bedtime stories. Every now and then, I'd glance at our wedding picture on the mantel. That frozen smile of 2 people who had no idea what time could do to love. We had our rough patches like everyone else. Sometimes he'd come home quiet, saying he was tired. Sometimes he'd scroll through his phone during dinner, half listening to the kids talk about their day. I told myself, this is just marriage. The spark fades, life gets heavy, but love stays. Right? Weekends were our best days. Saturday mornings, the kids and I would make pancakes while Michael mowed the lawn. We'd eat breakfast on the back porch, listening to birds and pretending our little corner of the world was perfect. Sometimes he'd look at me, really look at me, and say, "We're lucky." And I'd smile, because I believed him. I believed every single word that man said. There's one memory that still hurts to think about. It was last spring, before everything unraveled. Our daughter, Layla, had a dance recital. She'd been practicing her routine for weeks, and I'd sewn every sequin onto her costume myself. Michael promised he'd be there, but an hour before the show, he called. "Hey babe, something came up at work. I can't make it." Layla tried to hide her disappointment, but I saw it. That tiny crack in her little heart. I told her, "Daddy works hard so we can have everything we need." She nodded, brave and quiet. That night when we got home, I saw him sitting on the couch, hair wet, freshly showered, a takeout bag beside him. He said he got done earlier than expected. I remember thinking, why didn't he just come? But I didn't ask. Because good wives don't make trouble. Now looking back, I see those moments for what they were. The beginning of the distance, little absences that turned into habits, excuses that started sounding rehearsed. He began dressing better for work. New shirts, a faint whiff of cologne he'd never worn before. He even started working out again, saying his back was stiff from sitting all day. I smiled, encouraged him, told him he looked great. But somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, "Something's changing." There were other small signs. Tiny, forgettable things that only made sense later. He started locking his phone. He never used to. We shared everything, passwords, emails, calendars. It was all open. But suddenly his phone had a passcode. When I asked, he said, "Company policy. Security updates." It sounded believable. He stopped laughing during our movie nights. He used to laugh the loudest, popcorn flying, kids giggling. But lately, he'd just sit there, half smiling, scrolling through his phone while pretending to watch. When I'd ask, "Everything okay?" he'd reply, "Just work stuff." Simple, short, dismissive, and I'd nod. Because I wanted to believe that love could survive autopilot, I kept trying. Planning little date nights, leaving sticky notes in his lunch bag. He'd thank me, kiss my cheek, but his eyes, they weren't there. It's funny how eyes can tell the truth when words don't. You can fake smiles, Fake interest, fake almost anything. But not eyes. One night, after the kids were asleep, I caught him staring out the window. I asked softly, "What's on your mind?" He said, "Nothing, just tired." I remember standing behind him, close enough to feel the warmth of his back, but it felt like we were miles apart. That's the part no one warns you about, how distance doesn't always start with fights. Sometimes it starts with quiet, with routine, with love that forgets to speak up. I told myself he was stressed, that maybe I wasn't doing enough. So I doubled my effort, cooked his favorite meals, planned a family picnic, even bought new bed sheets because he once said he missed the fresh hotel feel. But nothing changed. If anything, the more I tried, the colder he became. And then one morning, he smiled at his phone. Not a polite smile, a real one. The kind that reaches the eyes, that makes a man forget where he is. When I asked what was funny, he said, "Just a meme from work." But he didn't show me. And that was the first time I felt fear, not because I thought he was cheating, but because I realized I didn't know him anymore. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and studied myself. I looked tired. My hair had grays I hadn't noticed before. My hands were rough from dishes and laundry. I whispered, "You've lost yourself, haven't you?" It wasn't about him then. It was about me. How much I had given, how little I'd noticed myself disappear. Still, I believed we could fix it. I believed love could be resuscitated if you just tried hard enough. But the truth? Sometimes you're the only one trying, and that's the loneliest place in the world. Loving someone who's already gone. The following week, I decided I'd talk to him. Really talk. No distractions, no kids, no pretending, but that conversation never happened. Because before I could find the right moment, before I could gather my courage, I saw that message. The one that said, "See you tonight, my love." And with that, all the quiet warnings suddenly made sense. It was a Thursday morning, ordinary in every way that matters until it wasn't. I was packing lunches. The kids were arguing about who got the blue thermos, and Michael was standing by the counter, scrolling his phone like always. He had that little grin again, the one that never seemed to appear when he looked at me anymore. It was faint, private, like he was smiling at a secret. I said, half joking, "You look happier than your coffee." He chuckled and slipped the phone into his pocket. "Just work stuff, babe." That phrase, work stuff, had become the wall between us. Every time I tried to climb over it, he built it higher. He kissed the top of my head, grabbed his keys, and left. The kids ran to the window to wave goodbye like always. I stood there for a second longer, watching him drive away, something in my chest tightening in a way I couldn't name. When I turned back to the counter, his phone buzzed. He'd forgotten it. For a few seconds, I froze. Michael never forgot his phone. It was practically glued to his hand. The screen lit up, and that's when I saw it. The notification that changed everything. "See you tonight? My love." The name underneath read Alyssa C. My stomach dropped. I didn't open the phone. I couldn't. Even if I wanted to, it was locked now. A passcode he'd started using a few weeks ago. I just stood there, staring at that glowing screen like it was radioactive. There are moments in life when everything slows down, when the world keeps moving, but you're standing perfectly still, trying to decide if you're crazy or if your world really is cracking open. This was one of those moments. When he came home that evening, I said nothing. I just watched him. The way he smiled. The way he looked at me, almost too normal. I wanted to ask, "Who's Alyssa?" But I didn't. Not yet. I wanted to be sure. Because if I accused him and he turned it around, if he made me feel like the crazy one, I wasn't sure I could survive that kind of gaslighting again. So I waited. And waiting turned into watching. The next few days, I noticed patterns. He started staying later at work again. He took longer showers, shaved more often, and his cologne, that one I'd bought him last Christmas but he never used, suddenly became a daily ritual. When I asked how his project was going, he said, "Stressful, but good." His voice was calm, confident, too confident. And then, the Saturday that followed, he told me he needed to run a quick errand. Normally, I wouldn't think twice. But my gut didn't let me relax this time. So I told the kids to get their coats. We were going out too. I didn't have a plan. I just drove. At first I thought maybe I'd head to the grocery store. But when I saw his car turning left toward downtown, something inside me whispered, "Follow him." It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't rage. It was the quiet, desperate instinct of a woman who just needs to know. So I did. He drove to a coffee shop I didn't recognize, a small one tucked between a florist and a laundromat. He parked, stepped out, checked his reflection in the window, and smiled. Then she appeared. Alyssa, tall, blonde, younger. Maybe late 20s. She looked like the kind of woman who laughed easily. Michael walked right up to her and hugged her. Not a friendly hug, a familiar one. The kind that lingers. My daughter's voice came from the back seat, soft and confused. "Mommy, why's Daddy hugging that lady?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I watched him touch her cheek, gently, and for a split second, the world tilted. Because in that touch, I saw everything I'd been missing. The warmth. The attention. The tenderness. He had it. Just not for me anymore. I drove away before he could see us. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. The kids didn't understand why I was quiet the rest of the day, but I couldn't speak without my voice breaking. That night, I lay in bed beside him, listening to him breathe. He smelled faintly of her perfume. I knew because I'd smelled it once when I hugged my daughter's teacher. The same floral scent, light and expensive. I wanted to scream, to shake him awake and demand to know why. But I stayed still, wide-eyed in the dark, while my heart broke silently inside my chest. The next morning, I tried to go about my routine: breakfast, dishes, laundry. But everything felt wrong. Every sound, the clatter of spoons, the hum of the dishwasher, felt like it was happening in someone else's house. I caught my reflection in the toaster and barely recognized myself. That woman looked haunted. By lunchtime, I decided I needed proof. If he was going to destroy our family, I needed to make sure I wasn't the one left looking like the fool. So I started small. I checked our shared credit card statement, something I hadn't done in months. There were new charges: a boutique restaurant downtown, a floral delivery, a jewelry store receipt. All from dates when he'd said he was working late. I printed everything, every receipt, every timestamp. Then I opened a notes app on my phone and started writing things down. Dates, times, little details. It felt like building a case, except the defendant was my husband. Over the next week, I began noticing his stories falling apart. One day he said he had a meeting. The next, he couldn't remember who it was with. He mentioned an office dinner, but his shirt smelled faintly of wine, and Michael didn't drink. Each lie was small on its own, but together they painted a picture that screamed the truth. He was cheating. And worse, he was comfortable with it. One night, while putting the kids to bed, my son asked, "Mom, why doesn't Daddy tuck us in anymore?" My throat closed. "He's just busy, honey." But inside, something shifted. Because my children were starting to feel it too. The distance, the change, the quiet absence that had settled into our home like fog. That's when I knew I had to act. Not just for me, for them. I couldn't let them grow up thinking this was what love looked like. A woman shrinking so a man could lie more comfortably. I decided the next step wasn't confrontation. It was clarity. If I was going to blow up my life, I wanted to do it with evidence. Clean, undeniable truth. No more maybe or what if. So I waited for the right moment. One where there would be no doubts, no excuses. And when it came, I'd be ready. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing in the world is a woman who finally decides to stop believing the lies. It happened on a Tuesday. A day so normal it didn't deserve to carry that kind of heartbreak. The sun was out. The air smelled like cut grass. I was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing dishes while the kids chased each other around the living room. Michael had said he was working from home that day, a rare thing for him. Except he wasn't in the home office. His laptop was gone. His car was gone. And he hadn't said a word about leaving. Something inside me went cold. I called his phone. No answer. I texted, "Hey, where are you?" The kids want to know. A few minutes later, the little typing bubble appeared. then disappeared. Nothing came. That was when I knew something was happening right now. I grabbed my jacket, told the kids we were going for a ride, and strapped them into the back seat. I don't even remember thinking. My body just moved. The school bus stop wasn't far, maybe 5 minutes away. That's where he always dropped the kids in the mornings when I was running late. But as I turned the corner, my heart stopped, because there he was, standing beside her, Alyssa. They were by his car, talking close like the world didn't exist. And then, right there, in front of that bright yellow school bus, in front of our kids and God himself, he leaned in and kissed her, full on the mouth. I didn't breathe, didn't blink, didn't move. The kids froze too, confused by what they were seeing. Layla whispered, "Mommy, Daddy's kissing that lady." And something inside me, something I'd been holding together with duct tape and prayers, finally broke. I felt this rush. Not of tears, not yet, but of clarity. Like the world finally snapped into focus. All the excuses, all the late nights, all the half smiles and tired lies, they lined up perfectly now. It wasn't work. It wasn't stress. It was her. It had always been her. And right then, I did something I never thought I'd do. I pulled out my phone. I hit record. I filmed them. Every second of it. The kiss, the laughter afterward, the way he brushed her hair behind her ear like he used to do mine. I zoomed in just enough to see their faces clearly. And when he finally looked around, he saw me. Our eyes met. For a second, I saw panic flash across his face. He froze, realizing the damage he'd just done. But it was too late. I had it. The truth, caught in the open air, undeniable and cruel. He started walking toward the car, waving his hands, mouthing something like, "It's not what it looks like." But I didn't wait for explanations. I put the car in drive and left him standing there in the rearview mirror. The man who kissed another woman in front of his children. Layla was crying softly. My son sat in stunned silence. And me? I just drove. Hands trembling, heart racing, tears burning behind my eyes. I pulled into a parking lot near the park and turned off the car. The kids didn't know what to say, and I didn't either. So I just said, "It's okay, babies. Mommy's here." But even as I said it, my voice cracked, because I wasn't okay. Not even close. When we got home, I put the kids to bed early, pretending everything was fine. I told them Daddy had to stay late at work. Then I went into our bedroom, shut the door, and watched the video again. I watched it until I couldn't anymore. Every frame felt like a stab. The way he smiled at her, the way she touched his arm. It wasn't just cheating. It was tenderness, intimacy, the kind that comes from love, or at least something close enough to make you question your whole marriage. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding my phone, shaking. The tears came hard, fast, ugly. That kind of crying that makes your chest hurt, like you're breaking from the inside out. That's what it felt like, because betrayal doesn't just kill trust, it kills memory. Every good thing you thought was real suddenly feels like a lie. At some point, I heard the garage door open. He was home. I wiped my face, hit pause on the video, and took a deep breath. I didn't plan what I was going to say. He walked in like nothing had happened. Dropped his keys, kicked off his shoes, smiled. "Hey, babe, how was your day?" I just stared at him. And he froze. Because whatever was on my face, it told him I knew. I said quietly, "You kissed her." He blinked. "What? You kissed her?" "At the bus stop. In front of our kids," he stammered. It's not." I held up my phone, pressed play. The sound of his voice and her laugh filled the room. He looked like he'd been punched. His mouth opened, but no sound came. I said, "I want you to pack your things." He started crying then, the kind of tears that come when a person realizes their control is gone. "Please." "It's not serious, Michael," I said. Steady, calm, final. "You kissed her in front of our children. There's no coming back from that." He tried to touch my arm. I stepped back. That small movement, that refusal, was the moment I took my power back. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't begging to be seen. He spent the night on the couch. I didn't sleep at all. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling the silence in the house like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. The next morning, I called my sister. I told her everything. She didn't gasp or pity me. She just said, "Honey, get your ducks in a row. Keep that video safe." That's when I realized I wasn't just heartbroken. I was at war, not with him, not even with Alyssa, but with the version of myself that had accepted less for too long, the version that made excuses for every lie. That woman was gone now, and the one who took her place, she was done being quiet. The morning after I caught him, something inside me changed. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, still. Like a switch had flipped, and the woman who used to cry herself to sleep had been replaced by someone colder, sharper, calmer. Michael thought silence meant forgiveness. But what he didn't understand was that silence can also mean strategy. He made coffee like he always did, acting like everything was normal. I sat at the kitchen table, phone in my hand, eyes on him, saying nothing. He tried to start small talk, weather, work, the kids. Every word sounded foreign now. When he left for the office, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I opened my laptop, typed "family attorney near me," because love might make you blind, but betrayal teaches you to see. That day, I learned how to protect myself. The attorney's name was Diane. She spoke in that calm, professional tone that makes you feel safe, like someone's finally on your side. I told her everything, about the affair, the kiss, the video. When I mentioned the video, she stopped me. "You recorded it yourself?" "Yes." "Keep it. Don't send it to anyone yet. It's evidence now." The word evidence hit different. For the first time, I wasn't just a wife who'd been cheated on. I was a woman building a case. Diane explained my options: legal separation, custody, property rights. And as she spoke, I realized how much I'd lost by letting him control everything. He handled our finances. He paid the mortgage. He knew all the passwords. So when I got home, I started digging. Bank statements, insurance documents, retirement accounts. I opened every folder, every drawer, and sure enough, I found things. Money transfers I didn't recognize, restaurant bills that didn't match his work trips, a hotel charge from 2 months ago, the same weekend he'd said he was at a conference. I took photos of everything, organized them in a folder on my phone titled "Just in Case." Every tap of that camera shutter felt like taking a piece of myself back. That evening, he came home with flowers. Lilies, my favorite. "Can we talk?" he said, his voice soft, cautious. I looked at him, really looked. This was a man trying to patch a dam with tape, and I was done being flooded. "Sure," I said. We sat at the kitchen table. He apologized, said it was a mistake, that he was confused. He said Alyssa meant nothing. I didn't interrupt. I just listened, quiet as a ghost. And when he was done, I nodded. Then I said, "You kissed her in front of our children. That wasn't confusion. That was choice." He started crying again, saying he'd do anything to fix it. I looked at him and said, "Then pack your bags." He didn't expect that. His face went blank. "You're serious?" I nodded. "I'll talk to my lawyer about custody. Until then, you can stay with a friend. I don't want you near the kids until I decide what's best." He stared at me. Not angry, just stunned. Because for once I wasn't shaking or begging or pleading. I was calm. And that scared him more than anything. After he left, I made myself a cup of tea and sat in silence. The house felt strange. Half empty, half alive. And in that quiet, I started thinking about justice. Not revenge for revenge's sake, but justice that restores balance. Because he had humiliated me, publicly, shamelessly, and I wasn't going to let that end with me crying into a pillow. I wanted truth. I wanted accountability. And most of all, I wanted my dignity back. Over the next few days, I gathered everything: screenshots of his texts, Proof of his hotel stays, the video from the bus stop, witness statements from a couple of moms who saw something weird that day. Each file went into a locked drive. Each photo became a brick in the wall I was building to protect myself. I wasn't rushing. I was preparing. Because revenge, I've learned, isn't fire. It's precision. When I felt ready, I called his HR department, anonymously. I told them a concerned spouse wanted to report inappropriate conduct between a married employee and a coworker. They thanked me, said they'd look into it. And I knew they would, because I attached one photo. Just one. Him. Her. That kiss. No context needed. I didn't need to destroy him. I just needed the truth to be seen. A few days later, he called me, voice trembling. "What did you do?" he said. I kept my tone neutral. I told the truth. He said his company was investigating, that Alyssa had been pulled into HR, that rumors were spreading. I said, "Actions have consequences, Michael. Maybe next time you'll think before you humiliate your wife and children." He cursed under his breath, then started crying again, saying he'd lost everything, and I thought, so did I. But at least I didn't throw it away. That night, I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just sat on the porch with my tea, watching the sunset bleed into the sky. I thought about the years I gave him, the birthdays, the holidays, the small moments that once felt like home. And I felt real grief. Because revenge might feel empowering, but it doesn't erase the loss. You still have to mourn the person you were before the betrayal. And I did. Quietly. But here's what surprised me most. Under all that sadness, I felt relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone to choose me. I was choosing myself. I didn't know what the future would look like yet. Custody battles, court dates, maybe even loneliness. But it didn't matter, because control was finally back in my hands. That night, before bed, I walked into my kids' room. They were asleep, little faces soft in the glow of their nightlight. I sat down between them and whispered, "Mommy's got this. You're safe now." And as I said it, I realized I meant it. When revenge comes, it doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it walks in quietly, wearing the calm face of truth. That week felt like standing in the eye of a storm. HR had started an investigation at Michael's company. And though he hadn't been officially suspended, word was spreading fast. He tried calling me. Texts, voicemails, long, rambling apologies. But I ignored them. He wasn't talking to me anymore. He was talking to the version of me that used to need him. And that woman was gone. Then one Friday afternoon, Diane, my attorney, called me. Her voice was firm, almost satisfied. "They're offering settlement discussions," she said. "Apparently, he's trying to negotiate property division before this gets uglier." I smiled to myself. "Before he looks worse, you mean?" She chuckled softly. "You could say that." We set a meeting date. It wasn't just about money now. It was about closure. That night, I opened my laptop and watched the video one last time. It was grainy, shaky, recorded from across the street at the bus stop. But clear enough. You could see the school bus, the other parents, the kids waving, and then my husband, leaning in to kiss another woman. In broad daylight, while our children were right there. Every time I watched it, I noticed new details. The way he smiled before he kissed her. The way she touched his tie. The way my son turned, saw them, and frowned. That last part broke me the most. That innocent confusion on my child's face, the kind you can't explain with "Daddy made a mistake." It wasn't a mistake. It was a lesson. And I decided that lesson was going to cost him. The day of the meeting, I wore a simple navy dress, the one he used to say made me look too serious. That felt perfect. He walked into the conference room looking pale, thinner. Behind him, his lawyer. Beside me, Diane, cool and steady as always. The room was cold, quiet except for the hum of the AC. He tried to meet my eyes, but I didn't look at him. Diane began, "Mrs. Turner is seeking primary custody and a fair division of assets." Given the circumstances, we also request that Mr. Turner vacate the family home permanently, his lawyer countered. Of course. Said it was a misunderstanding, that Mr. Turner deeply regrets his actions, that there's no need for hostility. I let them talk. And then I said quietly, "Would you like to see the misunderstanding?" Both lawyers turned toward me. I slid my phone across the table, pressed play. The video began. No one spoke. Just silence, long, heavy, undeniable. You could see it all. The kiss, the background chatter, the school bus door closing, and then, at the end, my daughter's voice off camera. "Mommy, why is Daddy kissing that lady?" That line, that one question, was the bullet. His lawyer cleared his throat. "I think we've seen enough." Michael's face crumbled. He whispered, "Please, May. I didn't mean—" I cut him off. "You didn't mean to get caught." I stood up, gathered my papers, and said, "You can send the revised settlement offer to my attorney." And then I walked out. The next morning, it hit social media. I didn't post it. I didn't have to. Someone from his office must have leaked it. Because suddenly, there it was. A blurry clip of a man kissing his coworker at a school bus stop. No names mentioned. But everyone in his company knew. The comments poured in. Disgusting. How could someone do that in front of kids? Poor woman, he called me that night, furious. "You ruined my life." I laughed quietly. "No, Michael. You filmed that yourself. You just didn't know I was holding the camera." He hung up, and for the first time in months, I slept through the night. 2 weeks later, the HR department made it official. He was placed on leave pending review. Alyssa resigned before they could fire her. Meanwhile, Diane called again. He's willing to sign full custody to avoid trial. It wasn't just a win. It was validation, not because I wanted him punished, but because the truth finally had weight. The next part of my plan wasn't about revenge. It was about rebuilding what he broke. I met with the school counselor to talk about my kids. Told her they'd seen things, heard things. She nodded and said, "Children are resilient when they have stability." So I gave them that. Routine, safety, love that didn't depend on anyone's apology. Every morning, I drove them to school myself, and every afternoon, I waited at that same bus stop, the same one where my heart had shattered. Except now, when the bus doors opened and my daughter ran into my arms, I smiled. Because that spot wasn't haunted anymore. It was reclaimed. Michael moved out completely within the month. The house felt different, lighter. It could breathe again. Sometimes I'd find old photos of us. Birthdays, vacations, those fake smiles we put on for the camera. I didn't throw them away. I kept them in a box labeled before, because that's what they were. Memories of who I used to be, not who I am now. One afternoon, I got an email from HR, accidentally copied. It said, "Investigation closed. Employee terminated effective immediately." I didn't forward it. Didn't reply. Just stared at it for a moment. Then I whispered to myself, justice doesn't need witnesses. It just needs courage. And that was that. That weekend, I took my kids to the playground. They laughed, ran, climbed. I sat on a bench sipping coffee, watching them like it was the first time. My daughter ran up to me, cheeks flushed, grinning. "Mommy, can we get ice cream after?" "Of course, baby," I said. She ran off again, her laughter echoing through the park. And in that sound, I heard everything I'd fought for. Peace, freedom, and the soft, steady rhythm of starting over. After the court papers were signed, I stood in the courthouse parking lot holding a manila envelope that officially ended 12 years of marriage. It didn't feel triumphant. It didn't even feel real. It just felt quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a tornado rips through your house. You're standing in what's left, realizing you survived, but you'll never see home the same way again. I remember sitting in the car that day, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I thought I'd cry, but I didn't. Not a single tear. I just breathed. Long, deep breaths. Because for the first time in months, I didn't have to look over my shoulder. Didn't have to check his phone. Didn't have to fake a smile for the kids when he came home late. That chapter was closed. And all that was left now was the rebuilding. The first few weeks felt strange, like living in a house that wasn't quite mine yet. The silence after the kids went to bed used to scare me. I'd turn on the TV just to fill the space. Now I let it be, because in that silence, I started to hear my own thoughts again. I reorganized everything: closets, kitchen cabinets, the garage. It was my way of reclaiming control, one drawer at a time. I took down family pictures that no longer told the truth. But I didn't throw them away. I put them in a box labeled Our Past, because even pain deserves a place, just not the front seat anymore. The kids, they adjusted faster than I expected. My son stopped asking when Daddy was coming home after a few weeks. My daughter, she drew a picture one day, the three of us holding hands under a rainbow. I asked her, "Where's Daddy, honey?" She shrugged. "He's at work, I think." Then she looked up at me and said, "But we're okay, Mommy." I don't know if she understood everything that happened, but she understood the one thing that mattered: safety. And that meant everything to me. A few months later, Michael tried to reach out again. He wanted to talk, to see if we could co-parent peacefully. That's what he said. I agreed, for the kids' sake. We met at a cafe near the park, the same place we used to go before everything changed. He looked smaller somehow, like the guilt had taken up space where his pride used to live. He started talking. Apologies, explanations, tears. He said, "I don't even know why I did it." I was stupid. "I miss our family." I let him speak. I didn't interrupt. When he finished, I said, "I'm not angry anymore, Michael. I just don't recognize the man I married. And I'm not going to spend my life waiting for him to come back." He nodded slowly, his eyes wet. Then he said, "Do the kids hate me?" I sighed. "They don't hate you. But they don't trust you either. Trust isn't automatic. It's something you earn. Start there, and that was that." We parted peacefully. No yelling, no dramatics. Just two people finally standing in the ruins of what they built, realizing they couldn't rebuild it together. After that meeting, something inside me shifted. Forgiveness, maybe, not for him, but for myself, because for so long I had blamed me. Maybe I wasn't fun enough. Maybe I worked too much. Maybe I let motherhood swallow me whole. But the truth was simpler. He chose to betray, and I chose to survive. That's it. Two choices. One that broke us, and one that saved me. The seasons changed. The leaves turned gold, then fell. I started volunteering at the kids' school, helping with reading programs and bake sales. People who had whispered about me months ago now smiled and said hello again. Small-town folks have short memories when the truth is clear. Sometimes, I'd overhear other mothers talking about their husbands, their struggles, their perfect marriages. And I'd just sip my coffee listening quietly. Because I knew better now. Perfection isn't real. Peace is. And peace is something you build, brick by brick, day by day, with honesty and boundaries. One night, after the kids went to bed, I sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, listening to crickets. I looked up at the stars. They were bright, almost too bright for that small town. And I thought to myself, I'm still here. After everything. After the humiliation, the tears, the fear, I'm still standing. That realization didn't come with fireworks. It came like a quiet sigh, a deep breath I'd been holding for too long. By the time spring came, I'd started smiling without realizing it. Cooking had become fun again, not an obligation. I danced in the kitchen with the kids, played silly songs on the radio, burned pancakes on Sunday mornings. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Messy, real, peaceful, and that peace. That's what healing really looks like. Not forgetting what happened, but refusing to let it define every tomorrow. Then one morning, I drove past Michael's old office on my way to the grocery store. The company sign had changed. New name, new management. For a moment, I felt a strange pang of nostalgia. Not for him, but for the version of me who once believed in forever. I whispered, she deserved better. And smiled, because now she finally had it. That weekend, we visited the beach, the first real trip since the divorce. The kids ran toward the water, laughing and screaming, their footprints trailing behind them in the wet sand. I stood there watching, the ocean breeze in my hair, and thought, this is what starting over looks like. Not loud, not dramatic, just peaceful, just mine. As the sun set, my daughter took my hand and said, "Mommy, this is the happiest day ever." And in that moment, it was. I used to think revenge was the most satisfying feeling in the world. That watching someone who hurt you finally face consequences would heal everything inside you. But I learned something different. Revenge might start the healing, but forgiveness, real, quiet forgiveness, is what finishes it. Not forgiveness for him. For me. Because carrying anger is like keeping your hand on a hot stove and wondering why it still burns. One day, you just have to let go. It's been almost a year since that day at the bus stop. Sometimes it feels like another lifetime. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night and remember how it felt. The shock, the ache, the disbelief that the man I trusted could do something so careless, so cruel. But then I remember what came after. The laughter of my kids, the mornings filled with peace, the sound of my own heartbeat not racing anymore. And that's how I know. I made it through. I see him sometimes, at school events or drop-offs. We keep things polite, no bitterness, no scenes. The kids hug him, talk to him, then run back to me. They know where home is, and maybe that's enough. Maybe that's the balance we can live with now. He lost his career, his image, the life he built on lies. I lost my marriage, but I found myself. And honestly, that feels like a fair trade. There's a small park near our house where I take the kids every weekend. It's nothing fancy, just swings, a slide, and a worn-out bench that faces the sunset. That's where I go to think. To breathe. To remember that everything that broke me also built me. One evening, I was sitting there watching the kids play, and an older woman sat down next to me. Gray hair, kind eyes. She said, "You look peaceful, honey." That's rare these days. I smiled and said, "It took me a long time to earn it." She nodded. Peace always costs something. But it's worth every penny. And I thought, she's right. Peace isn't free. It's paid for in tears, in sleepless nights, in decisions you never thought you'd make. But once you have it, you guard it with everything you've got. I don't share my story to shame him. I share it because maybe someone listening right now, maybe you, are sitting in your car, or your kitchen, or in the dark after everyone's asleep, wondering if you'll ever feel like yourself again. And I want you to know. You will. It doesn't happen overnight. You'll cry, you'll question, you'll blame yourself for things that were never your fault. But one day, you'll wake up, and you'll realize you didn't think about them first thing in the morning. And that's when you'll know. You're healing. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't come with applause or recognition. It's quiet, almost invisible. It's in the way you start singing along to songs again. It's in the way you laugh at your kids' jokes without that heaviness sitting in your chest. It's in the way you start making plans that don't depend on anyone else showing up. That's healing. And when it comes, you hold it close, because you earned it. If I could talk to the woman I was a year ago, the one holding that phone, watching her husband betray her in broad daylight, I'd tell her, "You're about to lose everything you thought you needed, but you're going to gain something better, yourself." And she wouldn't believe me, not then. But she'd get there eventually, because pain has a strange way of turning into wisdom, if you're patient enough to listen. Now, when I look at my life, I see the cracks, but I also see how the light comes through them. Every scar, every bruise, every tear has made me softer, not harder. And maybe that's the real victory, not proving him wrong, but proving myself right, that I could survive, rebuild, and still choose love. Love for my kids. Love for the little routines that make our home feel safe again. Love for the woman who looks back at me in the mirror. Tired, yes, but still standing. The other day, my daughter asked me, "Mommy, do you think Daddy still loves you?" I thought for a second, then said, "I think Daddy loves us in his own way. But that's not the kind of love I need anymore." She nodded, satisfied with that answer, and then ran off to play. And I smiled, because even that small moment felt like freedom. Now I know, life doesn't always go back to what it was. but it does go forward. And forward can be beautiful too. So if you're listening to me right now, and you've been betrayed or broken or made to feel like your worth depends on someone else's choices, I want you to hear this. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become after it. Did you like my story? Please like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story of mine travels. Sometimes the loudest revenge is simply living a peaceful life, one that no betrayal can touch again.